in the depths of the unknown, where shadows whisper and fear takes form. Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub, the place where classic horror and mystery come alive. Tonight, I bring you a reimagined version of The Double Shadow by Clark Ashton Smith, retold with the suspenseful narrative style that grips the soul and breathes new life into this haunting tale. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the shadows.
My name is For Petron, so I was once called in Poseidonis, yet even I, the final and most devoted disciple of the sage Avictus, cannot name the thing I am destined to become before another dawn arrives. And so, beneath the waning glow of silver lamps, in my master's marble dwelling that towers above the raging sea, I set down this account in frantic haste. With ink steeped in forbidden virtue, I scrawl upon parchment older than empires, hoping these words may outlast me. When I am done, I shall seal them within a cylinder of orichalcum and cast it into the abyssal waters, lest the transformation awaiting me erase all trace of my confession. Perhaps sailors voyaging between Lafara and will one day recover it from the waves. Perhaps fishermen will draw it up in their nets. If so, let them read and take heed. Never again should mortal feet trespass upon the pale, haunted house of Avictus. For 6 long years I have lived apart from the world, bound to my aged master, surrendering youth and its desires to the pursuit of arcane mysteries. Together we have plumbed depths no other dared approach. We unraveled glyphs that predate mankind, conversed with the long dead of forgotten ages, and summoned dwellers from crypts sealed before time itself. Few men have sought us in our desolate refuge among the storm-worn cliffs, but many visitors have come unbidden, nameless beings from realms beyond space and memory. The mansion itself is a monument of dread, white and cold as a sepulchre, older than the memory of the dead, raised by hands of men, or perhaps demons, before myth began. Below, the northern sea hammers the reefs with endless fury, its roar filling the house like the voices of 1,000 imprisoned spirits. The winds shriek around the towers, yet cannot shake them. To the seaward side the mansion rises sheer from the cliff's edge. On the landward terraces, twisted cedars bow eternally beneath the gale. Marble beasts guard the gates, colossal women of stone loom above the porticos, and within, statues and mummies keep their silent vigil. Save for these, and the spirits we have conjured, there is no companionship here. Shadows and leeches alone have served our daily needs.
All men knew the name of Avictes, the last surviving disciple of the dread Malagris, that necromancer who ruled Susran from his tower of black stone. Malagris, who lay dead for years while the world still believed him alive, whose rotting lips continued to whisper spells and oracles long after breath had fled. Yet Avictes sought no throne, no earthly dominion. Having mastered all that his terrible teacher could impart, he turned away from the cities of Poseidonis, hungering instead for a dominion far stranger, far vaster. And I, Farpatron, a youth then, was chosen to follow him into exile. Since that day I have shared his vigils, his austerities, his invocations, and now I must also share the doom that has answered his call. At first terror consumed me, for I was but mortal, a novice, when I beheld the monstrous faces of those who obeyed Avictes, spirits of sea and earth, of stars and heavens, drifting through his marble halls. I trembled at the black coils of things that rose from the brazier's smoke and recoiled from the formless gray enormities that pressed against the circle of 7 colors, eager to break through. I gagged at the wine poured by cadavers and the bread set before me by phantoms. Yet in time, repetition dulled my horror. Habit numbed the strangeness. I came to believe with blind faith that Avictes was master of all enchantments, sovereign over every spirit he dared to summon. It would have been well for him and well for me, had he been content with the lore of Atlantis or the runes of Thule, or the secrets carried from Mu and Mayapan. Those alone were power enough, blood-written spells that could summon demons from distant planets, incantations to unseal the doors of unborn centuries, formulas to traverse the atoms and speak with the spirits of the sun. But Avictes hungered for more. He craved a darker empire, a deeper dominion. And in the 3rd year of my apprenticeship, fate delivered into his hands the mirror-bright tablet of the lost serpent folk.
It was by chance, or so it seemed, that we discovered the tablet. At certain hours, when the tide withdrew from the jagged rocks, Avictes and I would descend hidden stairs carved into the cliffs, reaching a crescent-shaped beach concealed behind the headland where his house stood. There, upon the damp sands beyond the foaming surf, the sea would cast its strange offerings, relics from unknown shores, treasures torn from the abyss by storms. We had found shells of impossible size, lumps of ambergris, blossoms of coral that never withered, and once the corroded idol of green brass that had once adorned the prow of some forgotten galley from the Hyperborean Isles. But on that fateful morning, after a storm that had shaken the sea to its deepest roots, the sky was clear, the winds were hushed, and the ocean whispered softly, like silken garments trailing across the sand. There, tangled in seaweed, just beyond the retreating wave, something gleamed with a brilliance like the sun itself. I rushed forward, seized it before the tide could reclaim it, and carried it to my master. The object was a tablet, forged from a nameless metal, heavier than iron, impervious to rust. Shaped like a triangle, broader than a man's heart, it bore 2 faces, one side polished to a mirror, where our reflections appeared pale and corpse-like, the other etched with crooked, alien ciphers, carved deep as though burned by acid. No language known to Avictes or myself resembled these markings. We puzzled over it for days, arguing without resolution, studying its dazzling surface by the silver glow of tall lamps in a chamber sealed against the eternal winds. Avictes was certain the tablet concealed knowledge of immense value, perhaps the key to an elder magic not meant for men. And when scholarship failed, he turned to darker arts. Night after night, he summoned spirits, demons and phantoms, demanding answers, yet none could tell us of its origin. Any other man would have abandoned the quest, but Avictes did not despair, and it would have been far better for us both if he had.
The years slipped by, measured only by the endless thunder of waves against the black rocks and the ceaseless howling of winds around the white towers. Still, Avictes and I pressed deeper into forbidden realms, summoning, questioning, and probing mysteries that lay beyond the reach of mortal thought. And always the sea-born tablet returned to his mind, its crooked symbols mocking our ignorance. Then, by chance, or perhaps by fate, Avictes, in idle experiment, summoned the faint wraith of a sorcerer from ages long forgotten. In a whisper like the crumbling of ancient dust, the ghost revealed that the letters upon the tablet belonged to the Serpent Men, whose continent had drowned before Hyperborea had risen from the slime. Yet even he could not tell their meaning, for in his own time the serpent race was already a fading legend, their lore lost beyond recall. No spell in Evicti's grim tomes could summon those vanished beings from their epoch, but there existed an obscure Lemurian rite, strange and perilous, by which the shade of the dead might be hurled forward into future ages and then recalled, bearing knowledge from times beyond its own. Thus we summoned again the ghost, whose name was Yebeth. With burning gums and fossil woods, and with chants that shook the chamber, we sent his vaporous form drifting into the aeons of the serpent men. When at last we drew him back, he returned like a fading breath, his voice thin as the last echo of memory. Yet he brought with him the key, the secret of the serpent script. And having spoken, he dissolved into silence and oblivion. At last we could read the tablet. With labor and difficulty, we unraveled its twisted phonetics, its alien concepts, and what we found was no mere charm, but a formula of evocation, an ancient summoning once used by the serpent sorcerers. Yet the tablet gave no name to the thing it called, no hint of its nature. Worse still, there was no word of dismissal, no spell of banishment. It was an invitation without an end.
Evictes rejoiced, as though we had uncovered a secret older than memory itself. I tried to dissuade him, warning of the peril in summoning what we could not name, but he would not be moved. To him, our discovery was no accident, it was destiny. He dismissed my fears, boasting that in all his years of sorcery he had never called forth a power he could not command. What spirit, he said, could the serpent men have mastered that I cannot bend to my will? Bound by loyalty, though heavy with dread, I agreed to aid him. And so beneath the appointed stars, we prepared the ritual as the tablet prescribed. Rare substances were gathered, their fumes rising in acrid clouds. I will not speak of all we used, nor of the hissing syllables, words not meant for human tongues, that formed the heart of the ceremony. At last, we traced a triangle upon the marble floor with the fresh blood of birds. Evictes took his place at one corner, I at another, and at the third stood the withered mummy of an Atlantean warrior, Oigos, animated by our spells. In our hands, we held tapers of corpse fat, burning until the flames consumed themselves between our fingers. In the mummy's outstretched palms, talc and asbestos smoldered with a secret fire. Beside us, we had inscribed a protective ellipse, woven from the 12 forbidden signs of Omor, a sanctuary should the summoning turn against us. We waited as the stars wheeled overhead, the silence deepening with every moment. Then, when the last taper died, and the last ember crumbled in Oigos's hands, Evictes spoke a single word, alien, incomprehensible. The mummy echoed it, in a hollow voice like the echo of a tomb. And then with trembling lips, I too repeated the word.
In the chamber of evocation, we had left a narrow window open to the sea, and a high door unbarred to the landward hall, in case the summoned presence required a path of entry. Yet as the ritual unfolded, the ocean grew unnaturally calm, the winds fell silent, and the world itself seemed to hold its breath in dreadful anticipation. When the final word had been spoken, echoed by Oigos and myself, we waited, but nothing came. The lamps burned steadily in the midnight stillness. No shadow stirred, save our own and those of the marble women looming along the walls. The mirrors we had placed to catch the unseen revealed only emptiness. Evictes' face darkened with disappointment, while I in secret felt a surge of relief. Even the mummy of Oigos, questioned with the senses of the dead, confessed that he perceived no trace of a presence. "Then it is useless to wait," Avictes declared. "Either we misread the tablet or failed in some detail of the rite. Perhaps the being once summoned by this formula has long since perished or changed beyond recognition." I agreed readily, eager to believe the matter ended. Together we erased the blood-drawn triangle and the sacred ellipse of Omor's signs, dismissed Oigos to his place among the other mummies, and withdrew to rest. In the days that followed, life resumed its familiar rhythm. The sea thundered against the cliffs, the winds wailed through the cedars like the breath of some unseen god, and we returned to our studies as though nothing had passed. I almost forgot the failed conjuration, and believed Avictes had forgotten as well. All seemed secure. The stars revealed no ill omen, our divinations showed no shadow of doom, and our familiars, terrible to behold though they were, remained obedient. We thought ourselves untouchable, our wisdom and power beyond the reach of kings.
It was on a clear summer afternoon that the horror first revealed itself. Avictes and I walked the marble terrace, our robes of ocean purple stirring in the restless wind. The crooked shadows of the cedars stretched across the stone, and there, between my shadow and his, I saw another, an alien blot that no tree had cast. At first I held my tongue, though my heart faltered. The thing clung to Avictes' shadow, keeping always the same distance, yet it did not waver in the wind. It moved instead with a sluggish, viscous flow, like some thick corruption. Its hue was no color known to mortal eyes, neither blue nor black, but a sickly stain of unearthly decay. Its shape was monstrous, a squat head, a long, undulant body, unlike any beast or devil. Avictes noticed nothing. I drew nearer, hoping to feel some presence in the air, but there was nothing, no form, no substance, only the dreadful shadow itself. And when we returned to the house, the thing followed still, sliding across the steps, distinct even among the looming silhouettes of the marble guardians. Within the dim halls where no sunlight fell, it persisted, an obscene blot of pestilence, trailing Avictes as though it were his true shadow, his own soul made foul. All that day it haunted him. At the table where specters served us, in the library where mummies kept their vigil, the thing clung to him like a leprosy that would not be shaken off. Still, Avictes remained blind to it, and I, in my fear, kept silent, praying it would vanish as suddenly as it had come. But at midnight, beneath the silver lamps, as we bent over the blood-written runes of Hyperborea, I saw it draw closer, towering behind his chair, a streaming ooze of charnel corruption, fouler than the leprosies of hell. My courage broke. I cried out in horror, and at last I told my master of the thing that had chosen him for its companion.
Avictes gazed upon the shadow in silence, his lined face betraying neither fear nor awe. At last he spoke. "This is a mystery beyond my knowledge. Never in all my years of sorcery has a shadow come to me unbidden. It must be a true entity, or the sign of one, arriving late in answer to the serpent sorcerer's formula we thought barren. We must go now to the chamber of conjuration and demand its nature and its purpose." So we went and prepared as best we could. Yet even as we readied ourselves, the thing crept closer, until the space between Avictes' shadow and its loathsome twin was no wider than the breadth of a rod. We questioned it by every means, through our own lips, through the mouths of statues and mummies, through the voices of our familiars, But no answer came. The mirrors showed nothing. The phantoms sensed nothing. No spell we knew had power over it. At last, troubled, Avictus drew the ellipse of Omur upon the floor with blood and ashes, retreating into its circle of safety. But even there the shadow followed, clinging to his own as if corruption itself had taken form. The space between them narrowed to the width of a pen stroke. I saw horror carve new lines into his face, and sweat gather like frost upon his brow. He knew, as I did, that this was no spirit bound by law, but something outside all order, an omen of ruin. His voice shook as he cried, "I have no knowledge of this thing, nor power to halt it. Leave me now. I will not have another witness the defeat of my sorcery, or the doom that follows. Go, while there is still time, lest you too become its prey." Though terror gripped my soul, I hesitated. I had sworn obedience to him in all things, and if Avictus himself was powerless, what hope had I?
With trembling limbs I fled the chamber, leaving my master to his fate. Yet as I glanced back from the threshold, I saw the alien blot creep across the floor and touch the shadow of Evictes. In that instant he screamed, a cry like one tormented in nightmare, and his face twisted, no longer the visage of my master, but the mask of a madman locked in struggle with some unseen incubus. I dared not look again. Terror drove me down the dim hall and out through the towering portals onto the terrace. Above the cliffs, a swollen red moon hung low, casting the cedars into long, wavering shadows that flailed like the cloaks of sorcerers in the gale. I ran, stooping against the wind, toward the outer stairs that led to the broken paths beyond the house. But the marble beneath my feet betrayed me. Each step carried me forward, yet the terrace edge receded like a fleeing horizon. I ran until my breath was gone, but the stairs never drew nearer. At last I understood. Space itself had been warped by some malignant spell. No escape was possible. Resigned to despair, I turned back. Climbing the white steps in the moon's ghastly glow, I saw a figure waiting in the portal. By the trailing robe of sea purple, I knew it was Evictes. But nothing else of him remained. His face was no longer human. It had become a loathsome fusion of man and something unearthly, a visage more dreadful than death or decay. Its hue was the same sickly, corrupt color as the shadow, and its outline had begun to mimic the squat, monstrous profile of that thing. His hands were no longer the hands of any earthly being, and beneath the robe his body had lengthened into a nauseous, undulating form. In the moonlight, his face and fingers seemed to drip with a vile, melting corruption. And behind him, the pursuing shadow clung still, thicker, darker, doubled now in some unspeakable way, an abomination that had consumed both his form and his soul. I longed to cry out, but terror had stolen my voice. The thing that had once been Evictes beckoned me in silence, its lips decayed, yet twitching with a mockery of life. Its eyes, no longer eyes at all, but oozing pits of corruption, fixed upon me with a dreadful stare. Then, with fingers soft and leprous, it seized my shoulder and drew me, half fainting with revulsion, down the hall into the chamber where the mummy Oegos stood among his fellows.
The pale, eternal lamps burned coldly, casting tall shadows of the dead upon the marble walls. Yet Oigos's shadow was no longer alone. Beside it crept another, a loathsome twin, identical to the abomination that had consumed Evictes. In that moment I remembered. Oigos, too, had spoken the serpent word during the ritual. The horror had claimed him as well, for the thing we had summoned could reveal itself to mortal sight only by fastening upon flesh and shadow alike. We had dragged it from unfathomable gulfs of time and space, ignorant of the peril, and now it had come at its own chosen hour to brand us with its corruption. Since that night, time has crawled like a sluggish ooze of dread. I have watched the shadow merge fully with Evictes until no trace of the man remained. I have seen it seep into Oigos, twisting his withered body and lank shadow into a likeness of the same abomination. I heard the mummy cry out, not as a relic of the dead, but as a man in torment, writhing in the agony of a second death. Then silence fell, and he too became as the other horror. Now I know not whether the thing is one or many, nor whether its work will end with us three who summoned it or spread further into the world. Its intent is hidden, its nature unknowable, but I fear that what we have unleashed will not rest until its shadow lies upon all.
Now the shadow has turned upon me. It follows close, drawing nearer with every breath, until the very air thickens with dread. The familiars we once commanded have fled in terror, and even the great marble women along the walls seem to tremble where they stand. Yet the horrors that were Evictus and Oigos remain, watching, waiting, their eyeless gaze fixed upon me. Their silence is more dreadful than violence, for it promises a fate I cannot escape. The wind carries voices not of this world, and the sea roars with alien thunder. The walls themselves quiver like a veil before some vast abyss. Knowing my time is short, I have locked myself in the chamber of books to write this final account. The triangular tablet, the source of our undoing, I have hurled into the sea, praying it will never be found again. Now I seal these words within a cylinder of orichalcum and cast it upon the waves. For the space between my shadow and that other shadow narrows with each passing moment, and already it is no wider than the stroke of a wizard's pen.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.